This is the Cancer Interviews podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Morton. Thanks for joining us. Our guest on this episode endured 67 sessions of radiation, 12 cycles of chemotherapy, and a total of 7 surgeries. All this after being diagnosed with salivary duct carcinoma, a form of head and neck cancer. But we are very happy that he is here to share his story. He is Jonathan Gegerson of Parker, Colorado, and it's time to hear his story. So, Jonathan, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Thank you, Bruce. Good morning.
Good morning, and we look forward to hearing your story, but we want to start off the way we always do, and that's to learn a bit more about our guest and his or her life away from cancer. So if you would, Jonathan, tell us a bit about where you're from, what you've done for work, and what you like to do for fun.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Florida, but I've been living in Parker, Colorado for about 14 years. But I grew up as a child in Vail, Colorado, and I was a skier and active skier, and still am today. That's what I love to do for fun, is ski as well as spend time with my wife and kids. And my background professionally is I actually worked in the dental world in manufacturing for many, many years.
Now, what was your health like before your diagnosis?
Oh, I was very active, so my health was excellent. I was a very active person, exercised at least 4 or 5 times a week, used to do CrossFit and hike 14ers. And so I was a very active person. My health was very, very good.
Now, for all of us who were diagnosed with cancer, there was that time in which we noticed something about our health was abnormal. Something wasn't quite right. For you, when did you initially notice something wrong?
Yeah, I initially noticed something wrong in April of 2019. It was a lump on the right side of my neck. And that's when it kind of triggered me, like, what is this lump? And that's what sent me to my primary care provider.
And what happened when you went to your primary care provider? What did he or she find out?
Yeah, so she examined me with, a physical exam, and immediately asked me some questions on whether I've had some recent dental work, if I've had a root canal, if I've had any kind of infections, like sinus infections or anything. And those answers were no. So then she immediately said, it could be cancer. But we need to then send you for some further testing.
And the further testing was done by a specialist?
So the further testing was at first an ultrasound of the area to confirm it was a lymph node. Then she sent me for a PET scan. And then I went and saw a radiologist where they did a biopsy of the lymph node. And that's what the PET scan and the biopsy is what confirmed it was cancer.
Now, for all of us who have been diagnosed with cancer, it's not a question of whether it's a horrible day. Of course it is. But each diagnosis is a bit different. Each patient is a bit different in their makeup, etc. For you, when you got that awful news, how did you handle it? What was your reaction?
Yeah, my initial reaction was one of shock, because I was so healthy and so active. I never smoked, no tobacco use, and honestly, when it came to alcoholic beverages even, I would always limit myself to like 1 a week if I had one. So it was very shocking to me, and And I immediately began to go down that path of, oh my gosh, this is it. And I started to go down that path, and I had to catch myself and say, I can't tell myself this is it yet. I have to find out what all this means, because I didn't know what it meant at the time. I just knew they said you have cancer. They didn't know exactly what type yet. They just knew it was in my head and neck area.
By the way, we hope you will find time to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you click on the bell icon, you will be notified anytime we post a new interview. And we want to remind you that on Cancer Interviews, we are not purveyors of medical advice. If you seek medical advice, please contact a licensed healthcare professional. So, Jonathan, if you would continue with the story of your journey. You've been told that you have cancer, but you haven't been told what type.
Yes.
What was the chain of events that led to a more specific diagnosis?
Yeah, sure. So after it was confirmed that it was definitely head and neck cancer, and the PET scan showed that it was contained all in the right side of my neck. It hadn't spread anywhere else within the body yet. It was all contained on the right-hand side. I immediately went to an oncologist who talked to me about the treatment in his eyes, which was chemotherapy, radiation, but he also said the first thing is you need surgery. So he referred me to a head and neck surgeon who sent me for a CAT scan, and before I saw him. And when I went and saw the head and neck surgeon, he immediately said, well, we see a tumor. We don't know exactly if it's in the gland, if it's in the duct, where it is. But the first step is surgery to remove the primary tumor. And then after that, follow up with the radiation and the chemotherapy. And that was my first initial conversation. The oncologist I saw, they were not a specialist for head and neck. They were an overall oncologist. So I want to share that I ended up not choosing to use that oncologist or head and neck surgeon. I decided to go for a second opinion. And where I went for my second opinion is I actually went to MD Anderson in Houston, Texas. And that's where I saw a head and neck specialist for an oncologist and a head and neck specialist for the surgeon. And they decided the same thing, surgery first, followed up with radiation and chemotherapy.
Jonathan, did they tell you at any time how your life would change from this procedure, what the effect of it would be?
So the very first surgery, when I got diagnosed in 2019, I had surgery in July of 2019 at Houston, Texas, MD Anderson. They shared with me that I would be somewhat tight in the neck area, that the radiation will affect my jaw opening, and as things down the road healed, that I could see some fibrosis of the muscles in the jaw area as well. But other than that, they, at that time, they said those are kind of some of the side effects, long-term and short-term, that you could have.
Okay, now the chemotherapy, which you referenced earlier, there are many different chemotherapy regimens. For you, what was your chemotherapy regimen?
Yeah, so to date here in 2025, I have actually received over 200 cycles of chemotherapy and targeted therapy. And initially I was using Carboplatin and Taxol, with Herceptin was my initial treatment of chemotherapy. And I got that for 12 weeks. And then as things progressed and we saw a recurrence, I then started getting treated with Kadcyla, which is a chemotherapy that has Herceptin in it, and it's more of a targeted type of therapy. And I was on that once a month for quite some time. And now recently, I am on a targeted therapy called Enhertu, which is also a type of chemotherapy that has Herceptin attached to it as well. And that's what I'm currently on once a month.
Will you always be on that targeted therapy?
As of right now, because of what we know, because my cancer is so rare, my salivary duct carcinoma, my oncologist here in Colorado shared with me that out of 4 million people, 10 to 11 people get it every year. So because of that, there's very little known about it. So the answer is yes, Bruce. I will indefinitely be on this therapy once a month until either some research comes out or there's something that would define enough to say, we don't need to do this anymore.
Now, Jonathan, I have to ask, because this is a question I ask of anybody we have as a guest who has been diagnosed with a rare cancer. And it always seems to me that such a diagnosis carries with it a lethal 1-2 punch. It's bad enough that you've been diagnosed with cancer, but you've also been diagnosed with a rare cancer, and that means that there's not an abundance of competent people out there to treat it. Did you have a difficult time finding somebody you felt comfortable with? And when you finally found that person, were you in fact comfortable with your care team?
Great question, Bruce. Initially, I was not comfortable with the first 2 doctors I saw here locally. I felt that they did not have enough experience with this type of cancer, as one of the questions I asked was, how often do you see this? And the oncologist I saw here said, well, I be straightforward with you, I don't remember seeing another case with this type of cancer. So when I went to Houston and went to MD Anderson and met with the doctors there, I felt very comfortable. They had at least seen it, they had shared some cases, and they did tell me it was still very rare, but I felt comfortable there. So I would say at first it was, I couldn't find somebody close by that I felt comfortable with, but that's what led me to say, I need to go somewhere where they have specialists. That's where I needed to go. And for me, that ended up being MD Anderson in Houston.
So did you have to commute from Denver to Houston quite a bit?
What we ended up doing, yes, Bruce, we ended up eventually going to Houston, coming back, going again in July of 2019. And then when it was time for chemo and radiation, they gave me the option of either doing it there in Houston or coming back to Colorado and going to Anschutz in Colorado, the cancer center at the University of Colorado. We chose, when I say we, my wife and I, because we were in this together, chose to do it in Houston. So we ended up planting ourselves for 3 months in Houston while I went under all the treatment.
Now, when you look back on your chemotherapy, and we can agree that chemotherapy is never pleasant, but often it is necessary. When you look back on your chemo regimen, what was the toughest part?
Yeah, the toughest part was 2 days after the chemo. That's when I would not feel very well. Granted, the pre-meds and the medication they give you today is tremendous to really help with all of that. But I felt very tired and I felt weak for a good 4 or 5 days after the chemotherapy, and that was hard for me because I'm a very active person. So it was hard for me to feel this way of mentally, I wanted to get up and go do things. Physically, the body was not cooperating with me. And so I would do my best to go for walks and do things, but that was the hardest part for me.
Now, we've talked about the physical hurdles that you were going through, but what about the mental and emotional space through this? What were your biggest sources of support? You've already mentioned your wife, but other than that, what sources of support were afforded you?
Yeah, so I have 4 kids, so my kids were constantly calling and checking on Dad and encouraging me. I am a man of faith, so I absolutely was in prayer and just really committed and fully believed that this was not it, that I was going to get through this. And then I just took honestly, one day at a time. I did not think about the next day. I was like, today, I just need to do my best today. But between my wife, my kids, family, friends, and my faith is where I found support. And that doesn't mean, Bruce, that there weren't times where I was crying. There were absolutely times where I was angry. There were absolutely times I was asking the question, why me? And so I wouldn't want everybody to think that I was just hunky-dory and just going through this. I did my best to keep a positive attitude, but I absolutely had my moments of sadness and anger as well.
Now let's turn this journey in a more positive direction, and I want to ask you to think back to the time in which you felt things were trending in a good direction, that you were moving towards survivorship. What was that like?
Yeah, so once I finished the initial treatment of radiation and chemotherapy, and came back to Colorado to then heal up from the radiation, once I started to feel better, I got moving again, and I was exercising again, and I started to like, you know what, there's life. This is great. You know, I've made it through this. Life is worth living, and it's worth going through the suffering and any pain you may have to get to the other side. And so I started to rejoice and started to do my daily activities again, and work and exercise and get engaged with my family again more, be the husband and the dad I wanted to be. And so it was very like, hey, I'm gonna make it through this. I'm living. I'm living. And so I would tell you that was wonderful emotion. Of course, in the back of my mind, there was always that thought of, man, I hope this is it, and I never have to go through it again. And but once I started moving and getting up, I was like, there's life. This is good. This is really good.
Excuse me. Our guest is Jonathan Gegerson of Parker, Colorado. He has survived a rare form of head and neck cancer known as salivary duct carcinoma. And Jonathan, I want to ask you, think back to your health before your diagnosis. Think of all the active things you were doing, and then think of what you can do today. If what you could do pre-diagnosis was your health at 100%, how would you quantify your health today?
Yeah, so if in 2019, before I diagnosed, was the 100%, today I would say I'm going to say 70 to 75% of what I was, okay? And that's simply because I have had 4 recurrences. I have. And I'm still on a therapy once a month, but I have survived every recurrence. And so I always tell people, I say, yep, I'm getting chemo, and yep, I'm still going through therapy, but I'm doing it with a smile because I fully believe you can survive, and I'm gonna survive and live a long life. I always tell people today, my goal is to be able to keep skiing until I'm 90 years old and go down that path. So my health has changed, but I am still living life. I am still skiing. I'm exercising 3-4 days a week. I have absolutely had to change some things. My speech has been affected from my surgeries that I've gone through. My eating has been affected by it. I can't eat what I normally used to eat because of chewing, and swallowing has been affected. But overall, I'm living. And so I would say my health is 75% of what it was. 70 to 75% of what it was.
All right, Jonathan, we're going to wrap up now, and we almost always wrap up with the same question for our guests. Imagine that you encountered someone who was diagnosed with what you have been diagnosed with, and this person may have a lot of questions the same way you did when you were initially diagnosed, but now you know more than you did then. If you had any advice for this person, you might have lots of advice, but if there's one point you wanted to make sure got through, one takeaway for this person that they wouldn't forget, what would it be?
I would say always get a second opinion. Do not rush down the path of treatment. Get a second opinion and really ask every question you possibly can think of before you take the plunge, to make sure you're comfortable with your doctors and comfortable with the treatment path. That would be my advice to anybody who is going to deal with cancer, period.
All right, excellent. Jonathan, thanks so much for telling a story of just how much you've overcome and how you are blessed to still be living a very full physical life, even if it's not quite what it was pre-diagnosis. Thanks for sharing a tremendous story with us. Thanks for being with us on Cancer Interviews.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate the time and the opportunity.
And we want to remind you, as we always do when we wrap up, that if you or a loved one are on a cancer journey, you are not alone. There are people out there just like Jonathan who have information and inspiration that can help. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.